Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller and Robert Glasscock back again. And Robert, you mentioned something that I thought we could capitalize on. You said that in some of your more recent readings here, and this is May 2025, that people are asking about astrocartography, the maps part of astrology. Tell me more about that.
Well, they are. I just read for a couple who they're from Armenia, but they and their children live in Italy, and currently they're in San Francisco. They've both been in business separately with their own businesses, her as well as him, and now they're creating a new business as a couple. And they wanted to know about astrocartography. I've just recently been getting a lot of requests for this, so it's a
That's
very
interesting.
interesting
Yeah.
technique that Jim Lewis came up with. That before Jim Lewis, whom I was privileged to know very well for a number of years until he died of a brain tumor like his father. I think he was about 52 or something. And I have to say this: when he died, his estate was handled by a mutual friend of ours, a woman who was an astrologer. And she asked me when he had passed away, and I knew that he had sold astrocartography. Now it's used in virtually every program around the world. I knew he had sold it. But Jim always dressed the same: blue jeans, sandals, no socks, a flannel shirt, his hair in a little ponytail. So he looked like a hippie all of his life. And
California.
this friend of mine said, "Do you know how much?" And he used to stay with me when he would come to Los Angeles. So we were very good friends. "Do you know how much money Jim Lewis left in his estate?" I have no idea. $4 million. And I said, "Good for him." This is all through the sale of astrocartography. And I was with him when he was developing astrocartography, when it was just
Wow. Wow.
yeah. So
All right.
it's
Well, we've
amazing
got a
stuff.
chart here that I want to take a look at. This is a friend of mine, actually. She is interested in moving, and where she's living now, she wants to move basically just only a few miles, but it would be closer to this line right here, which is her ascendant line. We wanted to take a look at the chart here in this context of people are asking more questions about astrocartography in all kinds of contexts. So here's somebody, some people are open to big moves, and here's somebody who's looking at just a little move. So let's help this friend out, Robert, and give her some thoughts on what she might consider of moving a little closer to that ascendant line.
Well, if you if you look at her ascendant, it has to incorporate Uranus and Pluto, the conjunction of Uranus and Pluto. And she's born with this. And Uranus and Pluto are opposite her sun in Aquarius. So she's born with this. So if she moves, so this woman, because she is so smart, and she's also very metaphysically inclined and spiritually inclined with Uranus and Pluto rising, she almost has to be. Because it's the only way through astrology and metaphysics that she will ever make sense of herself and her life. But she will always feel like an outsider in a way because she is different from most people. So if she's living under her ascendant line, it will accent her Uranus and Pluto. Now, that can be good if she is working in a professional technological field that maybe involves the internet, satellite communications, those kinds of things. But for relationships, maybe not so good. That's in astrocartography, your Pluto and Uranus lines can be problematic. They're very challenging. So moving closer to her ascendant line will only strengthen her affiliation with that conjunction in her natal chart. Now, she likes Florida. And if you notice, her sun line moves along the the east coast, the Atlantic part of Florida, not the Gulf. she would find more fulfillment along that line in every way. Her sun is in her seventh house at birth. So if she's looking for a partner, even an unconventional partner, say they're in love but not necessarily married, then she'd be living under her sun line. And second of all, she's got her moon in Sag, sextile that sun, which is terrific. So one of the things you can do is to figure out the sun and the moon are men and women. And you can look at the midpoint between those two. They are roughly 55 degrees apart. Or what am I saying? 24? No, 65. So you divide 65 by 2 and you get 32 and change. So you add 32 degrees, let's say, to the moon. And let's say the moon is it's 24:49, but let's say it's at 25. 25 plus 32 is 57. 57, well, each sign only has 30 degrees, so 57 Sag is the same as 27 Capricorn. See what I mean?
Yes.
And that falls right
Gonna
on
put
her
it.
node. That
Yeah.
falls on her nodes. Now you have to include both the north and south node. Well, she also has Venus in Capricorn. It's not exactly conjunct that 27 degrees, but it's there. She would have a greater chance of happiness along the east coast of Florida, just from astrocartography. But now, of course, you've got to get practical because Florida now is undergoing a tremendous amount of pressure as far as hurricane damage, insurance, homeowners associations to increase the fees so that they can maintain these buildings by law. Nonetheless, you can still, in any market, find bargains. And she has the kind of chart with her moon in Sagittarius. Ideally, she would have more than one home or more than one property.
And that's because Sagittarius is a dual sign
Yes, sir. Very good. It's
and
exactly
it's
right.
in the
See,
fourth house
I
of
keep telling
home
you
and
how good an
family.
astrologer you are, and you were. You're such a good student of mine for all those years. Yeah, exactly right. Because it's in Sag. In fact, she'd be a good realtor. But if she doesn't want to go into real estate professionally, she's already built a house. Well, keep it. Stay there if she wants to for a while. Rent it out when she's not there. Maybe find another piece of property, and maybe a distressed piece of property. And why distressed? Pluto happens to rule distressed properties. So properties that are in foreclosure for some reason, or properties that have been on the market for a long time and they can't sell them. She's got this kind of chart. She's got Pluto rising along with Uranus, you see. Uh, she
Now
could
let's talk
find
about that because
Okay.
that seems a little far from 26 to 11. You're saying that that's rising?
Okay, here's where you go with this. You're absolutely right. Good point. Basically, in astrology, you have an 8-degree orb as far as major aspects go. So look at Uranus. Uranus is at, let's say, 3 degrees Virgo. Pluto's at 11 degrees Virgo. All right, they're 8 degrees apart. So they are definitely in a conjunction. Her ascendant is at 2649 Leo. So let's call it 27 Leo. That means that it is 6 degrees, her ascendant, from an exact conjunction with Uranus. So that's well within the 8-degree orb. So her Uranus is definitely conjunct her ascendant. Here comes what we call in astrology translation of light. When one planet is in aspect with another planet or point, and then it's also in aspect with a third planet or point, it translates the light of its first aspect to that second planet. So look at this. Uranus is 6 degrees away from a conjunction with her ascendant. Uranus is 8 degrees away from a conjunction with Pluto. Pluto is actually 14 degrees away from a conjunction with her ascendant. That's a little wide. However, because Uranus is conjunct her ascendant and Uranus is also conjunct Pluto, Uranus translates the light of its ascendant conjunction to Pluto and makes Pluto now also conjunct her ascendant. Translation of light. Everybody look it up on Google
Wow.
because it's something a lot of astrologers will miss without knowing about it. So you treat them the same. So her ascendant, Uranus and
Distressed
Pluto.
property.
Yes, yes,
A fixer-upper?
yes. So she's got the kind of chart and a nose for this, for finding properties that are distressed. Maybe they need a little work, new appliances, new electrical, new plumbing, a new roof, something. But she can get them for a relative song and
And
throw a
in
few
Florida, she
thousand.
could make a lot of money.
You could. But along the East Coast, if we go back to the astrocartography for a second and look at this, it's not just Florida, but this goes on up through Georgia, her sun
Clips a
line. And
nice corner of South Carolina there and on up. Yeah.
so Atlanta might be
Actually,
another.
actually, hold on.
Yeah.
Boom. We can zoom out even more.
Why,
Yeah.
this is the world. Thomas,
Well, let's say,
let me
okay,
tell you.
let's do this. Let's say that somebody said, "Well, okay, I got to stay in the United States, but I could go anywhere."
Well, let me tell you the incredible blessing that Jim Lewis gave to us astrologers. Before Jim and before astrocartography, all we could do with a client, they would come to us. Well, I'm thinking about moving to Barcelona. I'm thinking about moving to Tampa. I'm thinking about moving to New York. You had to set up a separate horoscope for every one of these places they were thinking about. Now, thanks to astrocartography, we're looking at the United States right now, but you can also look at the entire world in one astrocartography map. So you don't have to set up a million charts. You can immediately see where's your sun line, where's your Venus line, where's your Jupiter line, on and on and on, and begin to make some rational choices based on real astrology, thanks to Jim Lewis. God love him. So here we
Yes.
have it. So in this chart, you take your pick. She's also got her sun line moving through. It goes on up through Florida and up north. It goes into the Great Lakes. I can't read this chart because it's a little small, but you can follow that sun line. That's
Well,
only one line.
I know her well enough to know she doesn't want to live north of about maybe
I
right
can
here.
totally, I can totally understand it. I can totally get it. The other thing, unfortunately, with Astro, for example, her Jupiter line falls in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You can't live
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Her Venus line is out in the Pacific. So tough
There's
there.
another one, sadly.
You
So
know, another friend actually is looking at moving, and I don't see it on here. I don't see it, but he's actually thinking about moving to a proximity near his lunar line, his moon line. Our friend here doesn't have that, but what about moving toward your moon position? Is that kind of an emotional and heartfelt? If you, let's say you didn't have Venus and Jupiter, would the moon be a good backup?
yes, because you will feel at home there. And it does matter what sign the moon is in, because everybody's moon can be in one of 12 signs, and the moon rules things like security. Well, my idea of security with my moon in Aries is totally different than someone whose moon is in Cancer.
Sure.
So you have to be aware of this. Her moon, this we're talking about this client here with her moon in Sag.
Sagittarius.
She has a moon much like I do. It's in a fire sign. My idea of security is in new starts. New starts. The last thing I want is to live in one place for a long time. That's not security to me because of my moon. Same with hers, in fact, with the moon in Sag. She will benefit from traveling internally, philosophically, metaphysically, and spiritually, but also externally. So the more if she were to be able to acquire 3 properties over the years, especially if they were long favorable lines like her sun line, she would be home free.
Well,
She could make
let's play with that because okay, so you're saying the sun line, that's a good place. Because one of the things she wants to do, we talked about that Florida real estate market. She has equity. She's thinking if I take the equity out of this house, I could do maybe a B, and a C. So
well,
what
here
other
we go.
lines? Yeah. So what other
Is she,
lines would she look at?
well, she's thinking about this already. I'm glad to hear you say that. So her sun line goes right through Jacksonville in that area. So, for example, properties can be anything. They can be duplexes, for example. Now suddenly you own two for the
Mm-hmm.
price of one.
Mm-hmm.
She could either live in one temporarily when she wants to and lease out the other one, or she could lease them both out. She's built this place, and I'm sure she loves it because she built it. So she had it designed and built to what she loves, and it's in the panhandle of Florida there. So she could lease that
Which is
out
a
when she doesn't
beautiful
want to live
area,
there.
by the way.
Yeah,
It's
and I bet it's a
gorgeous.
beautiful home. But it's since she is an Aquarian and she has her moon in Sag, there's an essential kind of freedom to come and go as she pleases that will make her happiest wherever she goes. So I started to say the more property she acquires, the better. But of course, you have to live within reason there. And properties now, the mean property in many places is $1 million.
Well, let's look
So
at
a
these
lot of
other
people,
two plant. So here's the Uranus line, and then here's the Pluto line.
Pluto line, what does it go through? Is that Myrtle Beach?
Yes.
So she's now up in the Carolinas with that. And
Oh
I'll
boy,
tell you,
talk about another
Myrtle Beach,
popular area.
it is a popular area, and it's also not beset with the properties that Florida are.
Yeah.
It's not that Myrtle Beach is cheap, but it doesn't have the outrageous homeowners fees and insurance problems that Florida is now facing.
They're getting there because they've had their share of the storms
I'm
too.
sure
But
they are.
yes, you're right. I mean, okay. So we'll wrap up with this because we do need to move on. But so if she were to consider that Pluto line, let's do this. Let's look at there's Pluto, there's Uranus, and now let's go back and clear this out and let's look at her natal chart again. How would she benefit from being on those two lines?
Well, the Uranus and Pluto lines are rising for her. Uh, it depends on, look, if she were in business for Uranus and Pluto, I sort of say, here's her problem. It's not a problem, it's who she is. Her Uranus and Pluto in Virgo rising means she is and always has been her own woman. And as she gets older, let's say over 40, 42 especially, and into 50s and 60s, her sense of her identity is going to be very much tied to her freedom to move and make changes whenever she likes. And this includes domestically. So to be herself, to explore the interests that she has, which are ever growing. She's got moon and Sag. She never stops exploring and learning. And so if she's into astrology and metaphysics, what a wonderful kind of journey to be on. And she would love to be in a community where she can find like-minded people. And she can. They're always going to be in the minority because of the nature of reality. They just are. But moving under her Uranus Pluto line can absolutely, even where she is right now. Now, I don't know where exactly on the Gulf Coast she is. And I'll tell you my experience living in Vegas one year, finding a metaphysical group. I found 5 people in all of Las Vegas that
Yeah.
were into that. It's
Yeah.
it's so it's the nature of living in a resort community. Most resort places are by nature preoccupied with bars and restaurants and hotels and spas and tourists and all of that related stuff. But within that climate and within that community, you can still find people like her. But she would really flower under her Uranus Pluto line if she were willing to live there and to be aware of it, to make the most of it.
So
And
now
one of the things,
we're back up into this base broad area
yep.
right
And
there.
one of the things about that Pluto Uranus line is home and property. And she's already done it. She's built property now and where she is on the Gulf Coast. And she should keep it and expand out so she can use her equity in that property to maybe buy another property somewhere else, like a duplex, or it depends on the money, maybe a sixplex. But property investment for her would be terrific.
Let me ask you one other question here. I know that she
Yeah,
also goes to California quite a bit, which is her north node line.
that's another good region for her, Thomas, just like you're pointing out.
So
In
what
fact,
I'm getting at is I know she wants to travel. You nailed it. And one of the places she'd like to spend time because there's family there is that area. So all good, right?
yeah, and interesting you said family there because the North Node and South Node are karmic. So she will have karmic ties to the North Node and South Node going through that region of the country, maybe through San Francisco. And some of it will be past life karma that's tragic. And some of it will be past life karma that is wonderful because it's the South Node and the North Node. But that would be a wonderful place for her to, as another option, one among several properties, in other words.
Well, let
But
me
what,
ask you this in
yeah, yeah.
let me ask you this in wrapping up because this is a for a soul on a journey on planet Earth, sharing space and time with us. This is a massive, major life decision. Think about it. To
Yeah.
sell a potential home that you conceived, built, love in an area that you had dreamed of going to and being able to live in your later years there. And now thinking about, I could move around here if I were to let this go. Major decision. How much weight do you put on this? If you were making that decision, what would you do? How much weight would you give this chart?
I would put a lot of weight on it. But if it were my chart and I had built that property, I'm a believer in both and rather than either or. I wouldn't sell it. I
Hmm.
would capitalize on it, use it for equity
Mm-hmm.
because it looks, if you own property, you look good at the banks. And now you want to take out a loan for buying another piece of property somewhere. You've already got one and it's worth whatever it's worth and you built it. So your heart's in it. So they're going to loan you the money. So she can build on what she's already started there on the Gulf Coast and hang on to it, I think, rather than that's what I would encourage her to do. And plus, look at transiting Jupiter now, Thomas.
Well, yeah,
It's
I
a
was going to say,
tail.
now we have to look at the transiting
Well,
charts.
but look at it. Transiting Jupiter is about to enter Cancer, the sign of home and property.
Mm-hmm.
And Cancer is a water sign, so living near the water would be excellent for her. She already does. Myrtle Beach is near the water. San Francisco is near the water. But Jupiter going into Cancer, which it does in June, it's only 2 months away.
Yeah.
It'll be in Cancer until next June. This year coming up, starting this June, is ideal for her to entertain the idea that she's already thinking about additional properties. Cancer, is a collector. So rather than sell the property on the Gulf Coast outright, think about collecting properties. It could be a small collection, but she's already started. She's got a great house there that she loves. Figure out a way to capitalize on it without getting rid of it. Collect so now she can use it to springboard to another property and then another property. Three would be ideal for her. But that's how I would think.
Boy, and I'm just looking at this too from a transiting perspective. Of course, the sun will click 1 degree per day away from that, but Uranus is going to sit up there and then eventually slide right through her 10th house over the next 7 years. So, um, from that business standpoint of investing in these properties, fixing up, et cetera, that you've mentioned, some of those possibilities could be really good for her.
Yes, and let me ask you, as an astrologer, a fellow astrologer, the 10th house is opposite the fourth of home and property. So the 10th fourth axis is home and property. What does Uranus going into Gemini in the 10th house opposite her fourth connote to you in terms of home and property? Gemini. Think about
I'm
it.
I'm thinking go back to fixing up multiple properties is what I'm
You've
thinking.
got
I'm
it.
thinking
It's
multiple,
Gemini's.
but
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
or maybe buying investment properties. She
Yes.
could buy a duplex that's good enough on the beach and not have to put a lot of money in it. She could stick some tenants in there, and she has some cash flow. That kind of thing.
Yes, sir. Very good. See, good astrologer. Uranus is going into Gemini, a double sign. That's more than one home or property. As you said, it's multiple. She's already got one. Now she can make it two. And that'll be better than one. And if she ultimately, as Uranus is in Gemini for 7 years, she can make it three. She may be able to make it four. So this is a way for her to think.
Well, and if she
Just what
doesn't
you
want
said.
to get into that kind of business because she is in her golden years, her years of enjoyment, and maybe she doesn't want to take all that hassle on, she could travel to multiple places. And,
Yeah, she could.
who knows what all that could work out. Hey, Robert, this has been great. Thank you so much. Hopefully, it gives people some information on how they might look at their own chart. And we'll see you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast. Thanks for watching and listening.